Hello and welcome to another month of development of my game here. And I know at the end of last month I said I'm going to start adding pathfinding to mobs, but I'm going to do something smaller first, get it out of the way, and that's related to this. So you may have noticed that quite a lot of the things I've made still don't have icons. That's mainly because I make these quickly, just temporarily throw some random image in so I can check that they display properly. But unless it's more permanent like these, I don't usually make an actual icon. And that means I can't tell what anything is. So to counteract that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a tooltip system quickly. Okay, I have made a tooltip system. Now, if there's no name for the tooltip, nothing shows up. If there is something for the tooltip shows up, and it's not perfect because these are images in the object which aren't applied, so I'll have to do a check for children or something. I'll see. I can fix that. But stuff like this, it hovers over and then I've got it, so usually it's offset to the bottom right, but then if you go too close to the bottom, it pops to the top right. And then on the other side, if you go too close to the edge, it just bumps up against it and slides over. So that's that, and yeah. And then same thing here where it's an image inset. So I have to think about how I want that to work. But that's a smaller issue. So now onto the main task at hand of getting some pathfinding implemented. We'll see how this goes. Okay, after quite a bit of effort, I have A-star pathfinding implemented, and at the moment it's just a test thing where it's got a fixed start position to a fixed end position, and if I just left click, it goes to there. Now the pathfinding there's a little weird. I'll have to test that with more rigorous testing later. It's also on the borders because at the moment it's 1, 2, 3 and then 1, 2, 3. So at the moment it's positioning itself on the bottom left corner. So I'll have to offset that so it is in the center of each grid. That's pretty easy. And then the other thing that I'm going to do is get them working coming out the spawner is the next thing I'll do. Okay, I fixed those two things. The offset, that's easy. You just add half the cell size when telling it to go to a position. And the pathfinding issue where it's sort of going too far to the right and then curving back. That's because when I was calculating the X distance for the algorithm, I was subtracting a Y position from an X position instead of an X position from an X position. That's fixed. And the other thing I've done is if I place a spawner, when this spawns a mob, it will automatically go to the position. And if I place another one, it's the same. And then as you saw, if I shift and left click, it tells everything to go to the start point and then return. So at the moment they're all just going to this fixed destination. They're not picking their own one. So that's logic I'll have to work out. But before I do that, I want to re-implement stats for the mobs, because that when I was making the system, I sort of got rid of them to make it simpler for me to tell what's going on. So let me put those back in. Well, I haven't connected any UI to it yet, but at the moment, if a mob spawns and you then click on it, I'll tell you the name and the speed, and as you can see, I've got it set to follow the target at the moment. And then if I just hit this key, it'll move it to a new position. There you go. Then I can change this position if I want. Left clicking also deactivates the follow. And then apparently the camera movement breaks after that, so that's something to check on. Change it. I can show you. There's a stutter as it starts to connect to work out where the path is. Now, I'm pretty sure the reason for that is because when you send these scripts pathfinding information, they generate a whole new grid of pathfinding nodes, and it's doing that for the entire size of the dungeon, which is... how big is it actually? I've forgotten. Did I change it at all? Let's see. No, it's still 500 by 500, so that's quite a lot of data to process. So there are a couple of ways I thought about trying to address this, and one way is to have a permanent grid of the pathfinding nodes. I'm not sure if the MTs can access that at the same time. I'll try that, because that will that'll be one thing that improves performance if I can get that working. And then the second thing will be to give each of the mobs a search range, because at the moment they're obviously pathfinding for the entire dungeon. If they've got a fixed range, I could then input that, so then they only have to do a set distance. So that's something I might try, but if I get good performance with just having a fixed pathfinding grid setup, then I probably won't implement that for the time being, because when I do the logic for actually calculating paths and things, like choosing the destinations, when I do that, I'll have fixed ranges for them. So if they don't have to calculate the new grid, then that shouldn't affect performance really. Yeah, I'll have a go at doing that grid thing, but I'm not sure how long it's gonna take me. So this might be the end of the video this week. Might not be. We'll see. Hello, and welcome to another week of asset development. And in the interim between episodes, I did manage to get the spawning system updated. So now, when it spawns, it's a lot more performant, because it's not having to create this whole 500 by 500 grid of pathfinding nodes. Now, I couldn't get it to work to have a permanent grid just because of the way of the burst compile works. I think I'm using, based on the tutorial I use, it's using native arrays and stuff which have to be disposed of at the end of each job. So instead of doing that, I have a dynamically sized grid of path nodes. So before it was testing the whole, it was making a whole grid of every tile here, and if you made a really complex maze, you'd need that. But most of the times you're not going to need that, and I feel like I can get around a lot of that with the destination planning. So rather than one object here setting a position on the other side of the map, it'll send one closer and then go along like that. So what I'm doing is I'm taking the start position, the end position, and then I add a buffer around it. So I'm just doing 10 tiles on each edge. That includes this one, so it goes 10 tiles that way, 10 tiles that way, 10 that way, 10 that way. Then obviously it trims off excess ones and then uses that. That way I thought you've got some, like if you're going from here to here, if there's loads of obstacles around here, it can still walk its way around the back. I thought that was an appropriate amount of space to do that. Now the next thing I need to do is actually test whether an object can walk on a tile, I'm just going to use one of the existing ones for now. So I'll just make the grass so you can't walk on it. And then the idea is it should go around it. So let me get on with that now. Okay, that's now implemented. And if I just do a test version where it's going to, what is it, 5 5s? That's 1, 2, 3, 5. So this is like the target tile. If I place some obstructing tiles, these are just grass, but I made it temporarily so you can't walk on it. And then if there's a spawner down here. Now when it spawns, it will go around. And then I put one over here, it should track that way. Yep. Okay, there we go. That's good. Next job. I think I will... I think what I'm going to do is something I talked about doing previously, and that's improve the system for making the new tiles. At the moment, what you have to do is whenever you make a new tile, let's go this one. Oh, that's a bad example. Where is it? Stone tile. There we go. You have to go in and you have to assign all of these prefabs. These are the different variants depending on the situation it's in. And you have to assign all of these, which is just a pain. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it so all of these prefabs exist in their own scriptable object, and then these details remain, and instead of having all of these here, they'll just have a different field for the models. So it'll just be the variant or something. Well, I wouldn't use variant because I've used that before, but you get the idea. It'll just be one field where you choose this. Well, I've done that, but unfortunately this week has been very unproductive. Now, it did take me a while to do that because I had to change about 1,500 different variables around and reorder them. But now there's a field in the prefab for a tile where you pick the tile set. And then, as you can see, I've remade the two. And then these are all the fields that were in there before. But now, if you open it up, it's all neatly arranged in sequential order. So it's a lot easier to fill in because you just go one by one, add them all in. So yeah, it wasn't too bad to do. It just took a few hours of going through line by line, seeing which value is which, and changing it to a new value. Similar thing for this, but they only need a few filled in because they don't tessellate. But yeah, as I said, this week's been pretty unproductive. I have had other stuff going on, but I also had plenty of time to work on the game and just didn't. So that's pretty disappointing in the long run. So I'm going to try and focus next week and try and get a good chunk of things done, such as actually adding some UI to the entities. And then I also need to rework some of this UI system. Hello, and welcome to another week of game development. And I'm not going to do a very long intro because I want to get some stuff done this week, as opposed to the previous weeks. And to start off, I'm going to do two things. First, I'm going to fix this issue I'm having where it's logging spawning mobs even though no new mobs are being spawned. So I'll just quickly go in and find where this is happening and fix that. And the other thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make some sort of UI when you click on a mob, because at the moment I've just got it logging in the console here. I'm just going to make a basic UI that pops up and gives me the details. Okay, I have done both of those things. First one, it's pretty easy. I just had to move this line inside this if statement. Now that's fixed. And the second thing I've done is if I place a spawner down here and I click on it, we get this little window that has its name up here and tells me its speed, because those are the only actual values that are connected to it at the moment. So I actually did realize something, that if I go back to build mode, there's an issue with my new floor system. So if I place these tiles, these work fine. If I go to one of these is grass, the other's not. I go to them and I place them. You can see from the log it's placing, but the issue is it's not assigning any new materials when it's creating them. And I had played around with assigning materials to the entities, but I just couldn't get it to work. So my plan to get around that is I'm just going to make a custom editor window that you make a new floor prefab, and it just creates this folder with the variants for you. That's my plan. We'll see how that goes. Yeah. So that way I wouldn't have to manually assign everything. I don't know if it's possible to do. It might not be, in which case I just have to do all this manually. Okay, so hopefully this won't be too bad. The first bit was easy, and that was I've made this window where you select an existing tile set, then you give it a name, and then you'll assign the materials, but this doesn't actually do anything at the moment. And then what you do is you just click create set, makes this new folder. And this is where I need to make all the prefabs. So that's the next thing. We'll see how that works out. Okay, I've made a start on the object creation. So now if I create a set, it makes this folder, and in it you can see it's made this object. The name is temporary because I'm just manually assigning that for now. As you can see, it's created it with dirt. And if I just delete this folder temporarily, and then let's pick a new material. I think that's a proper material. Some of them are just from Blender. Now if I create it, ta-da, it's now using that material. Okay, that was very successful. So now if I create set, it'll take a while because it has to create a bunch of new assets. You can see we've got this new set folder here, and in it we have all the prefabs as well as the tile set with the appropriate prefabs assigned to it. Yeah. And then there is an update button here. If I change the material to dirt or something and click update, basically it's checking, and if the folder exists, it says update instead of create. But I'm doing this very lazily, because what it's doing is it's just deleting the folder with all the assets and then remaking them with new material. Something I didn't actually test is if we just do something random, we try and make a set with more than one material. I didn't actually test that. We'll have to see if we throw any errors here. It's done. And yep, that seems to have worked. I mean, it's really ugly, but that has in fact worked. And if I look in here, yep, they're all assigned. So even though that took quite a while to do, in comparison to having to manually make all these prefabs and assign them, that is definitely a major improvement. Okay, now the job is to what what's the job now? Probably clean up this. Okay, I have all that set up, tidied up, and now you'll see, place that tile, I can place that tile, I can place that tile. So that now works in the game, and then I've also tidied up the scriptable object, so now it's just the name, the cost, the type, the icon, and the tile set. And then I just added a little custom editor part that denotes whether the current selected tile set tessellates, just so you can see there. And that's just a lot cleaner. I'm not having to repeatedly assign other things like I had the check mark for tessellates, but considering the tile set as that's stored, it just retrieves it from there. And then the other thing I did is I just tidied up this prefabs folder. Now the tiles are in their own folder, and then when a new prefab is made, it makes, well, that's a bad example because this was made manually. Let's do this one. So it makes all the objects, the prefabs, and it makes the tile set scriptable object, and it just puts them all in their own folder here. So yeah, next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try and fix some of the issues with the UI, because there's a little there are problems, like I have all these open and then I do that and it keeps that open, so it's toggling them weird, and then I can do that, but then if I hit escape it closes those, it doesn't close either of those. So there's definitely some issues with the UI, so I'm just gonna have a go at fixing them. Okay, that wasn't actually too bad. So all I'm doing now is when it's setting which of these toolbars is active, it's checking before if there's already a toolbar and then just disabling that. And then the other thing is just on these buttons, it disables any toolbar that's active, which may come back to bite me if I have different toolbars elsewhere, but at the moment the plan is just to have these at the bottom here. So it just switches over and gets rid of them. But yeah, I think that's going to be a good stopping point this week. I still need to make a bunch of icons. Maybe I'll do that in between sessions. I'll make some icons for the other things. But yeah, that was a pretty good week. In total, not a large amount done on the game itself, but just having that system to make the new floor tiles, that's going to save me so much time and let me make a lot more variants in the game, which is going to be good. Hello and welcome to another week of development. Now this week I don't have a set theme in mind, sort of like I'm up in like pathfinding or working on the walls, but there are some definite things that I want to work on. The first thing though is I noticed while I was editing that if I made a prefab of this with multiple colors, some of them are the right way around with the materials, whereas other ones are flipped. So first thing I'm going to do is look into what's going on there, see if I can fix it so these are all consistent. Okay, that's all fixed. It was a bit odd. So basically, when you export an FBX in Blender, sometimes the materials aren't always the correct way around. Basically, I had to just go and separate the mesh and then rejoin it and then just re-export it. And that fixed everything. See, these are all consistent now. And yep, I don't actually need that anymore because it was just for testing. While I was doing that, I also took the opportunity and I finally finished optimizing the meshes for the floor tiles here, for these ones, and I got about an 88% reduction in all the different values. I've got them here. the vertices for this tile set before, it had 154,000 and some, and now it's got 17,500. So just think how many, if your entire dungeon was covered in these, how much faster it's going to be to calculate this, and the same for the edges, down from 300,000 to 36,000, bases from 152 to just under 20, and then the triangle is obviously double that, so 300 to 34,000. So yeah, I'm pleased with that. And then the next thing I'm going to do is, because the next thing in the pathfinding and such, I'm probably going to have to be reloading and testing more. So to improve the loading speed, I'm going to optimize the saving. These files, they take quite a while to load. Let's just take its time. There we go, that took quite a long time. The load timer doesn't actually work properly because of the way it loads. But essentially the reason that is because, as I've said before, every single tile, even if there's nothing in it, has stored the data in it. So what I'm just going to go through and do is make it so that if there's no data in it, it doesn't bother saving it. Okay, yep, that was pretty easy. So now what I can do is, if we just place a few tiles down, and then I go to save as, what do I call it? That. Do save as. You can see that's already saved. Didn't take very long at all. And if I stop, play again, load, here's video test. Ta-da! That was super quick. Now obviously if you have more tiles, it will load slower, and same with the saving, but it's just not checking every tile. It says if it's this tile type, because I'm only going to use this quote-unquote default tile here. So if it's this, you can ignore it and just move on to the relative data. So instead of 130 megabytes, this save is probably about 13 or 14 kilobytes. It's nice and small, which is going to make my life a lot more enjoyable for testing. Yeah. The other thing I'm going to do is sort out this tile indicator, because right now it's just this 3x3 grid all the time. Ooh, apparently it's also broken, partly. I did not expect that. That's an interesting thing. So that needs fixing. The other thing I'm going to do is, if you're not actively placing anything, like right now, it's just going to be this center tile. So that way it will be more apparent when you're selecting things. So let's fix this issue and give that a go. Okay, that wasn't too complicated, and adding that functionality in actually seemingly fixed the other bug. So if I go into place mode now, it just gives you the single tile, and then when you click on to place an object, it adds the 3x3. It's much simpler. And then obviously if you go back, it goes back to 3x3. And then it just makes more sense. So I still need to add some sort of lerping to that, and the UI going away. I'll make note of that. The next thing I'm going to do is actually implement the tooltips for these. So I still haven't done that. Okay, I've done both of those things. So now when you hover over them, it properly displays the, well, usually displays the name properly. Apparently there's still some bugs. Seems to be alright most of the time, and then I go to place mode, all those options on the side disappear. Now, I also place the spawner down. I can show you I've fixed the thing, so if we now drag off, it hides the menu, and even if we close it and drag off, it doesn't do anything. Now, there are obviously some issues with the camera positioning, it's pretty awkward, so I might have to look into that. And then the other thing is I still need to fix this slider. I still haven't done that. Let's just make an area here. And then if I place down another spawner, you can see that if I move that, so you can see when it spawns, if I pause, it still keeps moving. So that's something I need to fix. And I was going to say I might fix the height positioning of the entities. I'll say for the time being, I'll just leave them where they are and just get this pausing implemented. I think I'll also put a regular pause button in so that you don't have to go into the escape menu and you can pause. I think for the logic of the pathfinding, it makes more sense that if you go into build mode and you're changing the tiles and everything, that it pauses so that mobs aren't moving. Might also do that with the place mode. We'll see. But yeah, let's get this pausing implemented. Okay, that's implemented now. So I've put this pause button in here. But that only pause. Oh, I forgot to put the UI function script on it. Let's remember to do that. Let's go to place mode so that won't happen. But I made it so you can still move the camera around and such. And then the same thing, if you go escape, it pauses and unpauses. I did add the logic where if you pause beforehand and then escape and then go back, it remains paused. It saves the logic there. The functionality, let's put a spawner down. So if we wait for that to spawn, it starts moving and I hit pause, there we go. And I did put the hotkey E to it, just temporarily. I might get rid of that. Or did I? Nope, apparently I forgot to do that, but if I unpause, then it keeps moving. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is going to be done. Oh, yeah, I put this debug so you can see, so I could just see. But I'm going to implement saving of these entities, because there's no actual saving for that at the moment. I go save as, and then put I need to clear out the save folder because I have to come up with different names. I call it. Spell that right. I'm off at spelling. I save it as that, and then play again. Go back in. I then load that. You can see it loads all the tiles and everything in, but no entities to be found. I'm going to implement them now. But I think that's going to take a while, and there's nothing really to see. There's not really updates I can make until it's done. So I'm just going to call this week's video here, I think. Pretty productive week. Lots of little things, but it all adds up and just makes the game feel more polished, I guess. There's still a lot to do, obviously, and there's barely any gameplay. But having this stuff in, it is definitely... Oop, I crashed. UI controller. So that's another thing to fix. Yeah, this month it was alright. Slow start. Started to get pathfinding in, and then next week I might start adding some logic into the moving. I think there's enough into that. So yeah, that's where I'm going to leave it. But thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.